Welcome to this prediction. This is for the year 2021. It's taken a long time to format this and to decide whether to even go ahead and do it or not. Things seem to have changed dramatically in the last couple of years for anyone giving global predictions for a year in advance. So I think a lot of people who have done predictions in the past have actually dropped off the scene and perhaps just aren't interested themselves in uplifting predictions anymore. There's a lot of confusion in the air when you're trying to tap in to finding the answers or pathways or timelines or event horizons. There seems much confusion around. So it does make it quite difficult to perceive to great depths into the future. And I do think it's because there is so much transition, so much change. And really, when we're doing predictions, we're trying to tap into the collective conscious energy or the morphogenic energy field of the people on the planet, the ideas that are swirling around and situations that are occurring. So because there are so many people and so many different agendas and so many different morphogenic fields, I think as the population has continued to increase and different perspectives have opened and different timelines may have also opened, that's how we find it has become more difficult to tap into one scenario. But as this new decade evolves and then turns into the 30s and 40s and so on, you will come to understand that it's the point at which we left the age of Pisces and started merging into the age of Aquarius. And when such a big cosmic event occurs, you are literally seeing before your eyes the change of destiny and the change of humanity, the change of the planet and our whole cosmic vibration that we are moving around in. So these are immense times of change. By the end of this decade, you will look back and be in awe of the changes that took place and how quick the pace of it was. But this is just the beginning of where we're headed. And in probably 2 or 3 decades, you will literally not remember how life was. It is going to be that immense and that massive. And so with that, we start on the formulation of what I have seen for 2021 that I started with in March. There's a whole different set of perspectives that I've looked at, but primarily for this year I have used cards one way or another to tap into the energy field. So not necessarily my own psychic or intuitive awareness, but the collective conscious energy that comes up. Now, one of the sets of cards I've used quite extensively are the I Ching, which is a very old divination tool, and I do find that they have quite a degree of accuracy within them. Now, the screen you're looking at for the moment is a 3D live earthquake screen. It is November the 30th in New Zealand, and that is a live feed that is playing in the background. So you may see different notifications pop up on little earthquakes or big earthquakes that are happening while I am doing this reading for you. But I thought we may as well be looking at the globe and the earth and what is transpiring on her one way or another. So 2021 adds up to a 5-year. So we've just come out of 2020, which was a 4-year. And a 4 is all about hard work and quite often obstacles and difficulties. So a 5 is much more about freedom, change, adventure, new experience, and learning from mistakes. When I first started taking my notes for 2021, way back in March of this year, so I sit down from time to time periodically and try to tap into various thoughts or psychic intuitive awareness that comes to the mind. So I do start my yearly predictions quite in advance. So I started this one for 2021 way back in March, and that's when things started to go AWOL for the globe, really. Now, the interesting thing is something that I was dealing with at the time when I was trying to tune into it, it didn't even come up the energy I was tapping into in the numerology and some other things skipped 21 and went straight to 2022, which I thought was very odd. I kind of call 21 a year of reset. And I think that will happen. I think it's logical that that strategy will happen for most countries and most people on the planet for the year of 2021. We will be needing to reset a huge amount of things that have gone AWOL or out of kilter or lacking foundation or lacking grounding or lacking knowledge or understanding. I picked up first, and again this is going way back to March, that there is a similar energy pattern to 2020. So we're going along on a similar vein. I don't necessarily think that 21 is going to be a worse year. And just recently I was away with a group of friends and we decided to pull some cards as a group of us for globally for the year 21. So we all just sat and focused on what was coming up for 21. Now the cards that arrived with that group of people for the globe, no specific country or anything, just what was around for 21, they were actually fairly promising, especially from the very onset at the beginning of the year, from January through to say May or June. They actually seemed relatively steady. Then June, July, August, September seemed more out of sorts, more tenuous, a little bit more stressed, and then toward the end of the year they seemed to steady up again. What I did note in that particular card draw that had come was that I felt planes or aeroplanes or air travel or something along those lines seemed to be quite prominent and quite key in that early part of 21. Now I'm not sure why. Could it be information about planes or technology or air companies or tourism or travel? Could it be even something related to the MH370 that's missing? I didn't really have answers at the time because it was a fairly quick session that we were involved in. The other thing that did come to mind was there seemed to be quite a lot of feminine energy in the cards that arrived. So as if females play a major role in 2021. Whether this is female leaders or feminine energy or coming back to the power of female or goddess energy, I'm also unsure. We didn't look into it any more than that. But coming back again now to some of the other messages that arrived when I first started looking in March, some of the cards that came out, especially from the Psi system, which are the deck of cards that I use for my monthly prediction series, and some of you will have seen that and been following it. The cards that came out, the first one was the Sage. Now the Sage is all about learning and applying logic and strategy, and also the Sage is known as a person who has intelligence and he's working away as if he's finding answers to things. I felt back then that the Sage was about perhaps finding an answer to the big V, you know what we're talking about, which is what has affected most of the world in 2020. So that seemed good news to me, that there was workings going on behind it. And of course we're seeing that come to light now with the new vaccines coming out. I think we're up to now 6 or 7 different companies that are producing vaccines. Of course we don't know their true worth yet, but they say the trials are very promising. The Pfizer vaccine, which is the -81, is the least likely to succeed, and I'm only thinking of that from my own scientific background perspective. It is very difficult to find and maintain and keep -80 products in good form, especially if you're trying to ship them around the world or send them to communities. If that -80 freezing factor is not kept up to its exact maximum, the vaccine could become unstable and it may not be efficient and it may not be effective and it may not work. But there are many other vaccines that are now coming online that seem to have much more user-friendly conditions. Most of them can be kept between the 2 and the 8 degrees, which is standard for vaccines, any vaccines around the world. The second card that came out was the body card. That really I didn't like for 2021. The third card was the voyage card. Then we had the prison card. And then we had the birth card. So those cards, although not necessarily the worst that you could possibly get, they seemed to me to point still to the whole big V issue. Now I pondered, did we get a vaccine, and was it, number one, was it effective? And number two, was there a new virus that turns up or mutates? We are seeing signs of mutation possibly in Denmark, where they have killed off or culled off thousands and thousands of mink animals because there was a mutation of the virus in them. Now technically we're never sure, of course, but this is how it may have mutated from animal to human in the first instance, when it first seemed to take place, where it evolved from China or Wuhan in the very beginning back in 2019. And I believe it was far sooner than November of 2019. I think it could have been as early as July, August, that it was actually getting out around the world, and especially going up to Italy. It could have even been earlier. Coming back to 2021, it's the second year of this new decade of the 20s. And I have said this before, that the 20s are going to be a powerful point of massive change for all of us here on Earth in every way that you could possibly think. Everything is evolving, including humanity and including humans. Coming back to the cards that I saw, the voyage card, that can mean a literal voyage, a voyage of understanding. It can also mean travelling or moving things around by ship, and maybe ships or boating still becomes the mode of operandi more than aeroplanes or plane travel. The prison card I had written down in my book saying locked down, still locked down. Do we go back into lockdowns again for 21? That's something I guess that we'll find out in time. The birth card often means the signifier of a new direction, new ideas, new concepts, new understandings. It can also mean volcanic activity. Maybe we see an increased amount of volcanic activity for 21. It can also mean quite severe climatic storms, and especially through the tropic part of Earth. Now I think we are still rolling into really severe climate extremes and changes on the Earth to do with heat, cold, extreme weather patterns, flooding events, possibly earthquake and volcanic events as well. That's not going to change, and I've been saying this for many years. It's just growing more and more frequent and stronger every year. That's just a natural pattern that is occurring. Can we stop it? I'm unsure, but we can certainly put our hands up toward making it slower or slowing this scenario down. We come to the tarot cards I used, and I saw that the Two of Pentacles came out, the Page of Swords, the Queen of Pentacles, the Wheel of Fortune, and Temperance. So I'll give you my thoughts on what those cards may have meant. I feel that we may be juggling finances in 21, and I also felt that boats were again a major foray into our perhaps travel or how we trade around the world. So I still think boats somehow play a big role. The Page of Swords hints to new directions, and especially around concepts, intelligence, ideas, contracts, and signing things. The communication may be feisty, so we may see feisty energies around the planet with people determined to get their point across. And this could be your average citizen, but it could also be leaders and major power players and political groups and societies. I'm thinking maybe the Queen of England, her husband may pass away next year, and it could be in the 5th or the 10th months. And that is a possibility. He is old now, Prince Philip. I think he's 99 or something, so he's lived a relatively long lifespan, but there is a possibility that that could happen. There is also part of a cycle of evolution, and with this Wheel of Fortune and the Temperance cards, we still see periods of deep introspection, and we're walking away from a direction we've been going in. So we have a reversal, or we revisit a direction and we revisit some thoughts or attitudes that we may have had. Now we can see that coming because we're experiencing major change in many different levels on the planet from people's perspectives. We definitely are trying to find solutions through intellectual and through chemical trials. This would be especially the case for the V vaccine, but also for other health areas and modalities in life. Health is taking a major swing in areas of technological breakthrough, and you will see some amazing implementations as the decade unfolds. And again, I feel most of you will be literally blown away with the changes that come in terms of health, engineering, technology. It's just going to be just totally amazing, and this is part of this age of Aquarius. I'm pondering, does a new virus arrive? And I'm thinking that we may get a mutation, but I also think you may get another virus that pops up. Look, it may not be as severe or as totally global in terms of the one that we've just had, but I think we're moving into a decade of viruses. So this is this whole 20s decade. I think it has an undercurrent of this propagation of these viruses, and in part this is due to the way we treat animals on the planet and our interaction with them and our abuse of them. And it's also in part due to the warming climate, because viruses love these warm, moist conditions, and it's very easy for them to grow and to propagate. So we've got a whole bunch of reasons why this could happen. And of course we have to think, was it human engineered, and is it part of an overall program that many people think does exist on the planet, that it was called plandemic? You know, has it been planned to have some more sinister overtones? And if so, then they're not going to stop at one. There will be more and more and more for their own reasons or agenda as well. And that's something that hasn't yet been fully proven, although there seems to be indicators wherever you look that there's something not right. There's something that's been a little bit murky in the formation of this thing and how it's been handled and how it's got out and where it came from. Was it manufactured, etc., etc. So lots of questions that will continue to be addressed and will continue to be unearthed as well as we plough through into the next year. Coming to the I Ching, I got the feeling that we were seeing conflict as we moved into 2021, and also the word compromise. And it seemed to be that compromise was a word of importance in this year, and this is possibly right at the beginning of the year, and it says conflict and compromise. And it's a time to look at all beliefs. You don't have to believe everything you have been told either. Now, I think we are still in a little bit of conflict if we look at terms of, say, America and the politics that is happening over there. So currently we have still got Trump as president and Biden ready to take over for January the 20th. But of course there's all this tension around, was it a defrauded election? Have there been fake votes put in? So there's still countings going on over there. Now further on in the reading, and I'll give you timestamps for this, I look more closely at Trump and Biden and Kamila Harris, and the cards that came out for them and the messages are mind-blowing. You'll be really interested to see that if you're interested in American politics. And remember, I say to people, I live here in New Zealand, this little tiny dot of a place here, but wherever you are living on this planet, America is such a large player in the global power, the global finances, the global trade, economy, warring or peace, that America affects every one of us. So whether or not you're interested in their politics, whatever the outcome is, it will affect you individually one way or another. Some more messages from the I Ching. I also got about the big V, the big virus, and I must have done this back in August now, I think. So we've moved from when I was first starting it in March, and then I came to August. And I've written that the word V, the big virus, is at a standstill. Now then I said, retreat from public activities and common exchanges until time favours a direct action. Concentrate on personal affairs with dignity, letting go of some short-term rewards. Destiny to change a situation quickly creates extra conflict. Small-minded forces are advancing and reduce visibility, seek temporary shelter from conflict. Through this, plans can be made for future action. And I think when I look back at those notes from August, we had gone back into lockdown globally, especially the northern half of the planet, and there had been more conflict up there. People were in reduced visibility, they were back off the streets, they were back in their homes, and while that was happening, there was a phase where we have found vaccines. Now, some messages from the I Ching for the UK royalty for 21. There seems to be a gathering together. Public gatherings have possible danger, but they're popular still. And there's also talks about finding a new leader, possibly for the UK royalty. This will bring good fortune. And it says a suitable person who is a potential centre of strength and purpose is already present. Such a gifted individual should be approached and asked to take leadership position. Then general distress will disappear. Now I think that's talking about the UK royalty and not the UK politicians. And if this is the case, who is the person that is a gifted individual? Is it actually Charles or is it William? Because the likelihood is it'll be one of those two that get to take leadership if the Queen relinquishes her crown or her monarchy. And she may do that if her husband passes, or she may just feel it's time to move on in the year 21. I'm also getting the year 22 that keeps popping up for that. So we may see that happen in 22 as well. Now I did some work on Kim Jong-un and for him for next year. He's been a little bit of a strange one in 2020 because there was rumour that he was very ill early in the year and he has not been seen much. Then it appeared his sister was making some much more public impact and some even decisions around political strategic implementation. At one point she was very angry and said she was wanting to strike a war against South Korea, which was a little bit of a frightening situation. But then Kim Jong-un appeared to come back again, and there may have been a proper sighting of him. Now, I did a reading for him earlier in the year in 2020, and it seemed as though he had had a heart condition or a heart operation and that he had been very ill, possibly close to death. Maybe he even died and he was resuscitated. Is he still alive? I can't really comment anymore because I thought he may have died and I seem to be a bit unable to make a connection on that point. He possibly is alive. I still see the word shock coming up for him, and it says shock can be debilitating or prosperous. When overtaken by crisis, the wise look within and search their hearts for strength to face the world with courage. Courage can mean daring to take the unexpected path, to bounce back quickly, or have faith when confronting death. What seemed a major shock portends to a change that leads to better circumstances. Now again, this message came much later in the year, almost as if they're still saying that the country was in shock, or that they've had a big shock, or that some sort of death or a heart issue has played a major role. I'll have to leave it up to what happens. Do we see him again in the future for 21? Does he make more public appearances? Are there big changes for North Korea? It feels as though their country has been in shock and maybe could experience more shock. We have a quick look at Russia and Putin, and we see their temporary obstacles, not permanent, but maybe positive in the long run. Challenges for his leadership seem to be present, although they may not be successful. One wouldn't think they would be successful because he is the penultimate ruler for Russia, and he still has a lot of favour, although there are some strong competitors. Now, there was a very bizarre news article that came out a couple of weeks ago that said Putin was standing down due to a severe health issue. I forget what the particular health issue was. Some of you might recall that or know it, and you can leave it in the comment section. And it said his wife, or it's not really his wife, I think it's a lover he has, was begging him to stand down and not give the job to someone else, because it's not necessarily a job, is it? But to give the leadership of the country to someone else. Now, that was one strange article on its own that turned up, as I say, about 3 weeks ago, and then we've heard nothing since. But if you look back over any of my past readings that I've done, I have picked up for quite some years that I thought Putin wasn't in the best of health, but it never came to light. So I was quite interested to see that news article that said that he may have a major health issue. It could be something like Parkinson's, actually. As I say, I'm not quite sure. So there is something for Putin, I think, that has a little bit of change of structure in it and around it for Russia, or perhaps for himself. We looked at an overview for the I Ching with just USA in general, so not politically, not specifically the leaders, and it said, the overview for 21 calls for composure and contemplation as a result of deep introspection. An invisible enemy emanates from within. Do not underestimate the power of this force. Watch patterns and rhythms and cycles. A person who has divined the solution to a problem or envisaged a path to success should be placed in an honoured position. Fresh insight is what this will offer. Don't brood over shortcomings. Seek truth from experience and keep eyes focused on reality rather than shadows of illusion. So that was one of the main messages that popped up from the I Ching for the USA for 2021. Now, these I Ching messages are quite old, and some of them take a lot of contemplating and thinking, what are they actually talking about? So again, that might be up to you to interpret, and if you have any great ideas about the messages that come, put them down in the comment section. You're all free to do that, provided the comments are civilized and they're not derogatory or aimed at hurting anyone else or being intrusive or offensive. The I Ching for Australia, I'm still getting the message that water is precious. Now, something about within their country, the power of the feminine, and it says it's all broken. This has not been honoured in our modern world. It's a receptive force that can be overlooked by too much thinking, talking and planning. When does spring come for them, and does the grass plan to grow? I don't know what those messages are specifically saying, but it says concentrate on realities rather than potentials. Do not be too assertive. If you force things, you will become alienated or confused. Be patient. Take time. Be broad so you accept everything that comes your way. Let the river of changes flow to you. And then the word partnership, and then natural responses. Quiet perseverance and focus on accepting yourself. Be reserved. Act with caution. There is an antagonistic force that has been aroused against you, and I pondered, could that be China? Because I think Australia has created some tensions in its close water type areas and maybe within its trade alliances as well. Avoid the appearance of capitulation, which could allow the force to gather power against you. And I'm wondering again, was this China? Could it be, like a foreign European nation or a communist country or North Korea or something along those lines? Don't let yourself be a target. Discretion is essential at this time and an important role in a partnership. So Australia's messages seemed a little bit alerted, like a little bit heightened, as if they need to listen, as if they need to connect with their roots again and connect with maybe their own strength, their inner strength. Like, don't go outward and don't lose the fact of the power that they do have. I know they might be a bit weakened climatically wise, and they're suffering from drought and they suffer from fires and they're very hot, and it's going to be another hot year for everyone. We'll see every year get hotter and hotter. So Australia has a little bit of I think it has some balancing to do, balancing of karma and balancing of the here and the now, and learning to live with what they've got and really make the most of it. And they don't need to go too far. It's on their doorstep, but I don't know that they've found that out yet. Some messages from the I Ching for New Zealand, the country I live in. And there has been a lot of conjecture around our political leadership and the person who rules or governs our country again for the second term, Jacinda Ardern. She's known, has many different names around the world, and I'm not going to get into that in this reading or this predictive series. My political stances or opinions or feelings or thoughts on anything are irrelevant. It doesn't matter who or what I follow or don't or believe or don't. This is just a predictive energy series that come through the collective conscious, which is you guys, so it's your thoughts as well, and it's through the cards that are used. So it's not my personal feelings or thoughts about anything. So coming back to New Zealand, there's slow, steady progress and produce, and we have some of the greatest treasures. Now, I'm not sure what the treasures might be or who or what. We see constant gradual progress. This also applies to long-term relationships or partnerships, and I'm thinking this could be trade partnerships with different countries, and I think we have just formed some new ones with Asia and Pacific countries, so I have a feeling that grows and extends itself. Trees and forests are mentioned, and it is highlighted about our ancient land. We can't expect to have everything all at once. Development must be free to run its course. Success is there over time. Periods of isolation and withdrawal seem prominent, and perhaps more of the C or V issues we face in 21. And again, that seems quite strange to me, because at the moment we are C or V free. We're living very normal lives in New Zealand, and we have pretty much all of our freedoms, and our business realm is also doing quite well, so we're financially fairly steady as well. There's something here about separation from loved ones and feeling lonely. Past associates have finished and we're moving away from them, and we have misunderstandings resolved over time. So New Zealand's potential energy field for 21 seem relatively positive. We seem to be making new partnerships. We're moving forward, we're not moving backward. We are considering perhaps our earth and our climate issues, and we are looking at ways of resolving them, which I think is all sort of opening up and happening as of now, right now. I also feel that for our Prime Minister, she may have a wedding take place this year. She isn't married yet. She has one child. I do see a pregnancy for her, so possibly another child, and it could be this year. If it's not this year, then maybe it might have been like a pregnancy but a miscarriage, but there is, I think, another child coming for her. So then I had a look at the UK overall, so the United Kingdom as one parcel. Interestingly enough, and I thought this was very strange, it almost had the same cards as New Zealand's cards. But then again, we are a sovereignty of the UK, so we are ruled and governed by the British monarchy. Although the Crown holds us, or we are a sovereign country or a part of the Commonwealth, we do have our own politicians that do govern the basic day-to-day political parties for New Zealand. So in saying that, they still had periods of isolation and loneliness and queried the issues. They do make inroads but need to periodically retreat. And again, could this be the V that makes them retreat, or is it possibly political retreating? They seem to withdraw from conflict and they protect themselves from humiliation. To retreat in a heated atmosphere is not easy, but upholds integrity and grace. There seems to be some honourable character showing up, and they rise to an occasion, and they have proper handling of setbacks and an opportunity for good progress in the long run. So I did feel that initially in 2020 Boris Johnson would not remain in power for the whole year. So I'm looking back thinking now, was that in fact his near-death experience, because he did nearly die when he had the COVID? And that's what I said earlier when I talked about the fact that timelines seem to diverge quite quickly when we're looking into prospective outcomes for events. Now, it may have been a misunderstanding on my end when I said I don't see Boris Johnson being Prime Minister of England for very long, and I think that I picked up on his near-death catastrophic ending. But of course he has gone on to remain alive, and he's living, and he's still the Prime Minister of England. However, I'm still not sure that that continues for too long. I think he lost interest actually when his health took so bad. So it's almost like he is covering a job at the moment, just waiting for the next one to come through. And I think when it does, he will gladly give his notice in and end his tenureship of it. But I'm not sure if that's this year. So the UK seemed fairly strong in whatever decisions it's doing or however it's moving forward. I then took a look at China, and we see the words determination and harmony coming in. It says here they are determined not to be undermined, especially by lies or deceit, but they don't want to be the spreader of lies and misinformation either, or it will fall in on them. So that's a warning message for China, because they have been involved a little bit in, everyone knows it apparently, in sort of spy procedures or tapping into what other countries or politics is going on. So even though they don't want to be the spreader of lies, or they want no lies put against them, somehow they have to balance that in the way they proceed forward. And if they balance it appropriately, then they'll do okay. It says here, try to neutralize negativity. If China tried to be obstinate about issues, and this could possibly be Hong Kong or some of the new islands that they've been making off the coast of China and trying to take oceans and claim them these new islands as their land or territory. If they try to be obstinate about that, they will meet with misfortune. And there's talk of uprooting corruption in high-standing positions. And I'm thinking to myself, does this mean within China, or are they trying to uproot corruption in places like the US or Russia, or through the Middle East, or through countries within Europe? They are trying, they're definitely trying to make some changes, I think, at some point. But are they changes globally for the better for all of us, or are they just changes for the good for China? And that will determine whether it's successful or not, because if they're just about changes for China, they will get impacted severely by everyone else. Yeah, it says if they can walk with peace and balance wealth and poor in their country, especially around crops and food, they will have a more prosperous year. But if they don't balance all of those aspects and perspectives out within their own inner turmoil of their own country, it'll go to crack and ruin. So then I looked at South Africa, because a lot of people asked me on my prediction video last year to look at South Africa. So the cards that came up there were a little bit ominous, and there is some dark energy around. They had endurance and darkening of the light. So I think the endurance is something they really need to focus on and pull their deepest power and strength back into focus so that they can retain themselves as individual country. I'm talking about South Africa, the nation, not Africa, the continent. It says there is some form of negativity around South Africa, as if an enemy is invading. The obstacles they face are real, and they are a big challenge. At this point, it feels as if it is an ongoing issue or struggle. Many people on the world or around the world think that it's the earth resources that South Africa has that some big nations want. South Africa is very wealthy in terms of what's under the ground or in the ground or even in their oceans. And other countries might be wanting to take those precious wealth, abundance, minerals or objects. They have, you guys in South Africa, you have immense wealth, and it's a pity you can't use it to become a major power play on the planet, because you deserve it. Yet often your power is taken from you by others. It says here there is danger in the event horizon, especially in the dark. Now I don't know whether that means the dark of night, or does it mean the dark hidden agenda of things going on. There are people in power who may be corrupt, and extraordinary measures are needed to correct this energy that you are currently going through. So I think for South Africa, there's still this really tempestuous upheaval, if you like, for your country, and it's going to take you all to be a united force and this endurance to work through it. But eventually you will. I don't know that it will happen in 21, so you have to hold tight for a bit longer. I looked at France, because France is quite a big player too in many aspects of Europe, but also in other aspects around the world as well. So the cards that came for them were nourishment and approaching of spring, which were quite positive cards. And it said, if presented with an opportunity, prospects are favourable. It's an excellent time to make a clear decision and take strong action to move in a positive direction. In spring, a new sage may appear, a wise leader with new perspectives, and new relationships and new bonds can be easily formed, and they can be very creative, powerful and long-lasting. So then I thought to myself, gosh, you know, Emmanuel Macron seems to have so much animosity around his leadership. There are some who really like him, then there are others who really don't. And so there's this perpetual tension that runs through France. And, you know, we've had those yellow coat rioters for half of the year, and did they even go back as far as 2019? There's still riots going on there right at the moment. There's about the freedom of speech that the French people want, and then there's the anti-Muslim protests, and it's just rife with tension and animosity. And then remember, there was the massive fire in Notre Dame that literally burnt it to the ground, well, almost. So they've had this really tempestuous energy travelling through their systems at all levels in France. So who is this new sage that could be coming? So I looked to see when their elections were, and they aren't meant to be until 2022. So is it a possibility that a new potential sage turns up later this year and comes into the forefront and begins to be known? And could it be a new political leader? Or is it some sort of more religious, sectual leader that comes out in the open and seems to bring some sort of peace or harmony, or opens up the lines of communication, or brings back balance into France? But their cards that they got, they did bode really well for some form of positivity or lightening of this trench that has been cast upon them, this kind of negative energy that's been flowing through France. So then, just for the end of this reading, and I know there's so many aspects that I haven't covered off, but as I said at the beginning, it's really difficult to try and focus in on everything. You just literally can't. There's too much going on in the world now. There's too many things to try and look into. So this is a brief synopsis of a few different aspects of some of the major players in the world, perhaps some of the major energy lines or thoughts or collective conscious ideas or thoughts that are kind of just traveling around the globe, a bit like these lines that you see here on this image of the planet. It's not solid, it's not a solid construct, and everything changes continuously in the morphogenic energy field, and that's the type of energy that we're trying to tap into. So nothing is constant, and change is always an ever constant feature. And when there is change, as I said, it makes it hard to discern what way the change is going, how is it taking shape, and where is it shifting to. But the last thing I did do was to look a little bit more at the American political structure as we move into 21. So I looked at Trump, Biden, and Kamila Harris. Now I'm going to show you the cards that came for them, and you just have to trust that none of this is staged. I don't do anything that's fake. Everything I tell you comes from a place of honesty and what has actually been interpreted or dealt. So these were cards that I dealt out just prior to making this video, and I used the I Ching, and I will now show you and then read out to you the messages that came for each of these political players: Trump, Biden, and Kamala Harris. So the first set of cards you are looking at here are 45, which is gathering together, and 39, temporary obstacles. This is from the I Ching. This is the book that I use for the working out of the messages that come, and the messages are derived by, this was the first card that came, which is kind of like the present situation, and this is the second card, and you work out the difference between the hexagram lines over here, and then you read the differences for this final card, which is the temporary obstacles. Now these two cards were for the current President Trump. So this is really interesting because this card here has come out 3 times now with him when I have done readings for him. And as many people pointed out to me, because I probably wasn't aware, he is actually the 45th President of the United States of America. And he got that energy, and this is the 3rd time in totally separate readings over a period of months that this card has turned up for him. No one else but for him. I'm actually quite gobsmacked about how accurate these I Ching energy cards can be. So here are some of the messages that came, and I will read them to you for him, because I know a lot of you are very interested in the political, especially the Americans are very interested in the political messages, and Trump has a big following of devout followers. So some of you will be listening to this and hearing the messages, and then of course he has almost as equal amount of people who want him out of power. So again, keep it seemly, just listen to what's coming and be polite. This is what is current, right? The gathering together. And this is the next card, which is taking us into moving into 21. And it says temporary obstacles. So listen to this. In the course of trying to reach a goal or fulfill an ambition, temporary obstacles will invariably present themselves. This is not always a bad thing. Obstructions, difficulties, and even setbacks can eventually be overcome and become assets. Without irritating grains of sand, oysters would never make pearls. The obstacles pointed to here are not permanent, yet they are in the way for the time being. When a large boulder falls in the middle of your route, the best course of action is usually to go around it, rather than to try and move it out of the way. Temporary obstacles need to be seen for what they are, temporary, and not be allowed to take on too much significance. A positive aspect of even the most difficult stumbling block is that it can cause a person to turn inward, gaining greater depth of character and self-knowledge. While the short-sighted bemoan their fate and seek to blame their problems on others, the wise always look to see if the cause of the problem is within themselves. Through introspection, obstacles can become a means for personal growth and self-discovery. If you are facing an interruption of your progress, do not be overly concerned. Challenges are part of achieving every goal and every undertaking. Setbacks and reversals can affect morale, but keeping up your self-confidence in the face of obstacles is part of the successful solution to many, if not most, problems. Obstacles of short duration are best handled with a yielding nature. Go around the boulder, don't put your shoulder to it. Then the lines that are most poignant for this card, which is the direction that he's heading into for 2021, are these. And these are the messages. When one is in a position of responsibility or leadership, caution must be exercised when confronting an obstacle. A wider array of needs and consequences needs to be considered. Rash decisions and actions in such situations will bring misfortune. Nevertheless, a leader must remain firm and decisive on a course of action that has been set. Keep your priorities in mind. Those who will rely on you will be happy to see you have kept them in mind too. And then the last part of the message for Trump. Big obstacles often cannot be removed single-handedly. To move a large boulder that is in the way, many hands make light work. Do not confront a serious obstacle until you have gathered trustworthy supporters to help you. To move before your support is firm invites misfortune. So there's a whole lot of messages in here that are telling him to not cause ripples at this point in time, but there's the potentiality for this to be a temporary setback. So the more he maintains this fellowship with his people who believe in him and have faith and trust in him, or whatever it is, and the more he gathers them on board, there's this possibility that somehow he forges either a comeback or realigns himself for the next presidential election, because of course he can, because he's only served one term in power. So sometimes it's not about the here and now, but maybe he still digs deep, and maybe he's still trying to, find answers and solutions or whatever, and turn up again in another 4 years if it all goes according to plan and Biden gets in. So let's have a look at the next set of cards that came, the next two cards from the I Ching, which was for Biden. Now, some of you are going to love this analogy and what you see. I don't know this deck that well, and I don't sit here and work with it and remember all the cards. In fact, a lot of the cards I haven't even seen come out. And I think these are two that I haven't seen before. So the first one is Cutting Through, number 21, and the second one is 14, Affluence. Now, I couldn't help myself, and perhaps I'm the only one who sees it, but I see this massively as the Illuminati, the all-seeing eye. And theory has it, conjecture and conspiracies that Biden is part of this whole Illuminati or whatever you want to call them. So it feels as though, if we're on that line of thought, then there is a possibility that something has backed him, some sort of greater power. Now, if you go back to the founding fathers of America, it was all meant to be founded with trust and faith and honour and respect and looking after its citizens and keeping America a whole and safe country. And I think that's what they intended it to be, but somehow it may have got skewed, and somehow money may have played a role, or certain characters may have played a role. And remember, this is not my opinion, it's just what you see and hear on various outlets and various information feeds that come up. But this does look like an Illuminati thing. So is there power behind him that helped get him in? I don't know. Is he associated with it? I don't know. Some of you will have your own opinions, I've no doubt. So I'll read to you a little bit more about the card and what it happened to say, because I also think that it was quite amazing. This one here, listen to this. Supreme success, like the proverbial pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. A person whose fortunes have turned for the better shines brightly now. At the core of true success lies generosity and modesty. It is the tendency of a flexible or yielding nature to draw powerful forces to it, especially when prosperity begins to manifest. When this added power is wielded with grace and dignity, we have supreme success and great abundance. But be careful. Along with any accumulation of wealth or influence can come an increase of pride and arrogance. Fight this tendency if you want your good fortune to continue. Stay attentive enough to manage your affairs well. And remember that while prosperity beats the alternative, it is only one element of a satisfying life. A lasting prosperity is one that honours the highest values and furthers the collective good. Now, the lines that had the inference and meaning, I will read them to you now. The first lesson after an achievement of success is to stay fluid and mobile. The amount of wealth doesn't matter as much as its usefulness going forward. Wealth of any kind has the most value when used to launch new undertakings for the good of all, rather than to strengthen the elite status of a few or just yourself. One way to spread wealth is to be generous, especially with those who have helped you. The reliable support of trustworthy people is the greatest asset of all. And then the next line that was important was this. Philanthropy is an obligation of those in possession of mature wealth. By donating a portion of wealth to support the greater good, wealthy people can avoid becoming possessed by their possessions. On the other side, those who lack resources need not feel shame in asking for or receiving assistance. All wealth is a passing trust to be administered by people for a short time. A small-minded individual who is ignorant and of lacking this attitude will be controlled by what they own and the desire to accumulate more and more. Even though they have the potential power of abundance, they squander it or hoard it and therefore can never be joyful or free. So some really hidden messages in those cards for Biden, but it certainly feels like there's great success and there's backing for him somehow or somewhere. Now, I do think Biden has been through a lot in terms of loss in his family, and I think he, for the best part, if his health does maintain itself, that he has got some honourable attributes there, and that there is this feeling that he is going to be more giving and more thoughtful, I hope, to the general populace of people, and to the politics that need sorting, and to bringing back the country as a whole and trying to heal the rifts that have taken place. So we hope to see that happen if he gets into power on the 20th of January. Now, the last two cards that I did were for Kamila Harris, and these are her ones. She had treading carefully and retreat. It was sort of quite cryptic messages, I thought, and what we read more is this one, which is retreat. I am not entirely sure, but I believe that she has wanted to be president herself, and so in essence taking a vice president's role is a bit of a retreat, and it seems as though that was her best play or best move at this point in time. So it said, all worthy goals meet some resistance. When negative forces predominate, a well-timed retreat can be a good move for keeping your energy up and allowing you to persevere. Strategic retreat is not to be confused with escape or surrender. Nevertheless, a well-timed retreat may require quick and nimble movement in order to take up a new position before you are damaged by a current threat. You are not admitting defeat by such action, but increasing your options in preserving your energy and other resources. Sometimes it is necessary to slow down, let go, or move back to a better position yourself for future moves or to draw an opponent closer. Timing is critical, as is positioning and considerations of personal security. Skillful retreat is truly a sign of intelligence and strength. Periods of withdrawal or retreat call for cool-headedness, so keep your wits about you. Attend to details while allowing for enough time to contemplate the big picture. So the lines that seemed to be really important were the following. In retreat, positioning is vitally important. Avoid being too visible, too close to the source of your opposition. If you do find yourself positioned in your opponent's sights, the best tactic may be to lie low and keep still and wait for the moment to pass. Be extremely careful, because any movement now could work to your opposition's advantage. Then the next one was, this line refers to a situation where someone of integrity is under attack or is being vigorously pursued by an opposing force. In such a treacherous situation, movement in the face of danger is essential. Retreating when under attack rather than engaging in direct confrontation can also create the advantage of gaining sympathy for your cause. As I said, these are cryptic messages for her, but I think she did want to be in power and be a main player, and she has retreated or taken a sidestep, but I don't think her vision of being the leader or the first female president for America, I don't think that's gone away, and I think she is biding her time under Biden. So there's something going on there, and it feels as though there is still a degree of power that she holds, or that she has this propensity to keep moving forward. Is there a hidden agenda? There is a little bit, but to what degree, and what is it about, and who is it for? I guess you'll all find that out as time unfolds and as her particular foray into this political field unfolds as well. So for now, guys, that is it. I haven't looked much into the share market. If we get this big V under control, then technically things will start to pan out. But of course we see so many countries globally that lost money through closures and shutdowns, and companies that have shut. And so there is a downturn coming. There is a downtime. you'll see things drop off a bit. But by the natural cause of the populous nature of humans on this planet and the way that we are able to fight back, it will come back. You know, it's just timing. It's just evolution, and it keeps moving. So yeah, leave your comments and your points of view, and if some of you have got really intuitive or psychic visions of next year, of 2021, put them down and leave them in the comment section. It's all very interesting anyhow. So yeah, thanks for tuning in.